Hi teachers, my name is Sarah Smith. Welcome to Lead to Teach. I'm so excited for today's session because we're going to talk about how do you prevent chaos from happening in your classroom? How do you prevent noise and movement and off-task behavior from raining terror upon you and your students? So remember as always that you can download guided notes at leadtoteach.com if you'd like to fill out something as we go through this, but otherwise let's jump right in. You might remember I've told you about my first year disaster teaching first grade. And one of the things I remember about that year is that there was just this dull roar all day long. And it didn't matter if I had asked for complete quiet so that the kids could work during work time. I never achieved it, not once the entire year. And at the time, it was really easy for me to say, well, it's because I have a difficult student dynamic. It's because I have 27 of them for crying out loud. And it's because I have kids with ADD and ADHD. And a child with oppositional defiant disorder, and I have speech and language and resource needs, and I have a child with severe autism. And it was really easy for me to place the blame on them. But I've learned since then that there was a mistake I was making that was a really, really simple fix. And if I had fixed that, it would have prevented a lot of disruptions from even starting in the first place. So what I want to talk about today is how to prevent disruptions from taking over your classroom the way they once took over mine. And I'll tell you what that common mistake was that I was making. Okay, let's first start by saying what a disruption is. A disruption is any behavior that impedes learning either through unwanted noise, unwanted or inappropriate noise, or unwanted or inappropriate movement. And the movement could be as simple as kids fidgeting at desks with materials, but if it interrupts learning, if it impedes learning, we can consider that behavior a disruption. So much like precipitation on a windshield makes it difficult for us to safely and quickly reach our driving destination, disruptions make it difficult for us to achieve our learning targets efficiently and effectively. So I purposely made this kind of difficult to see because I want us to begin thinking about how disruptions impede every objective we have. Do you get it? Do you get it? Okay, so let's talk about the why of preventing disruptions. Why would that be so important? The first reason I want to note is because they reduce learning. This is a graph of teacher effect sizes from some teachers in our district. And what I want you to notice is that the teachers who have scored at the top here, who have the highest level of student achievement and are making the greatest impact, show the greatest effect size, are also the teachers who have the most well-managed classrooms. And unfortunately, the reverse is also true, that these teachers down here at the bottom of the graph who are showing the least amount of impact and the least student growth also have more poorly managed classrooms. So there's a direct correlation between how well managed a classroom is and how successful the students are academically. Okay, why prevent disruptions? Another reason is because they increase teacher stress. This is a text I had gotten from a teacher with whom I worked a few years ago, and can I just read it to you? Listen to this poor teacher. She said, "But you might want to know I had a meltdown on Friday, and I just don't know what to do anymore, especially in regards to him and sometimes with blank," another little boy. "I feel overwhelmed and just can't deal with it anymore. Just in case you wanted to know how I feel about the whole thing." So this is a teacher who has put so much time and effort into her classroom and into her students and is feeling so defeated and so deflated because of disruptions. So they increase teacher stress in a very real and severe way. Okay, why prevent disruptions? Because unfortunately, they also increase student stress. The reason I have this picture of my cute nephew, Israel, here is because he epitomizes this knowledge from research. So Israel is a kid who is very naturally curious and driven, and he loves to problem solve and he loves to learn. And at one point, I had gone to visit my sister's family, and their spring break didn't align with our spring break, which meant that I was able to pick Israel up from school every day after school. And I remember the very first day, he came and got into my car and sat down, shoulders slumped, big sigh, and said, C+. And I said, C+? What are you talking about? And he said, "That's the grade I give my class for how noisy they were today." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear it." And the sad part about this is that that happened every day. That was not an isolated incident. He got into my car every single day and said, F, D minus, D. And every day gave his class a poor grade for their noisy behavior. Unless you think Israel is an anomaly, he's not. Research tells us that the majority of kids prefer on-task, working, achieving environments to environments that are kind of a loosey-goosey or free-for-all approach. Okay, last reason I'll know about why you'd want to prevent disruptions is because they tend to escalate in severity and frequency. So you can see in this picture some pretty severe property damage that's happened in this poor teacher's classroom. And this is a little kiddo whose behavior started more mild, but became more and more problematic until it's escalated to a point that it's become out of control. And now we need a whole team of people to intervene in order to help this student become successful again. Can I give you a more extensive example? This is a first grade student. This was several years ago, but I attended this teacher's lesson during math. And these are items that I took away from two of the little boys during the lesson. So you can see baseball hats and math manipulatives, a couple math manipulatives, a number line, a whiteboard marker, and a pencil. And those are items that I took away during the lesson. And afterwards, the teacher's comment to me was, well, but it wasn't that bad. I mean, they were at least being quiet with those materials. However, a couple of days later, here's what one of the little boys did is took out his whiteboard marker, and you can see scratched on his phonics paper and did a little bit of work, but not much. A couple days after that, here's what we saw is a torn phonics paper and scribbled out work, and nothing has been done. And unfortunately, it escalates pretty quickly. Now we have a shredded paper, it's been torn, it's been thrown across the room, it's accompanied with vocalizations and shrieks of, I don't want to do this, no, I hate school. And then we get into more extensive property destruction. So you can see in this picture that the little boy has thrown baskets and crayons and pencils and glue sticks, not just the ones at his table, but at peers' tables as well. And it keeps going. So this was a day that all the kids were over at the rug for calendar, and he gets up and starts moving the chairs around the room and walking on them and jumping on tables. We see folder flinging, right? Throwing objects, throwing materials, not just his, but peers as well, knocking over chairs, toppling bookcases. And then this was probably the worst it ever got, as he, in a fit of rage one day, ran into a computer room and began turning over desks and swiping computers off of tables. So not just severe property destruction, but expensive property destruction too, right? So then this text came after this point, when this little boy's behavior had escalated to the point that he was now injuring the teacher and that she suffered bruising because he was lashing out at her as well. This is a broken wrist of another teacher who tried to help intervene and was also hurt. And remember, this is a kid in first grade, right? But the disruptions escalated to a point where they were just out of control. And what I want you to remember is at the beginning, the teacher's comment was, but it wasn't that bad. It may not be that bad, but if you don't nip it right away, I promise you it will increase to a point that it feels like a runaway train that will never come back. Okay, so let's talk about prevention. We're going to say prevention is setting up conditions in which disruptions are less likely to occur. So much like we paint lines in a parking lot to tell people where to park and which direction to drive and where to drop off, we want to do the same thing in our classroom. We want to set the kids up for success and make it less likely that they will engage in problem behavior. Can you imagine if there were no painted lines in this parking lot, how even experienced adult drivers would park? It would be wild. I mean, all you have to do is ever be in a snow-covered parking lot to know we can't do it. We need some structure in order to prevent chaos from taking over. So let's talk about the what of disruptions. There's two main causes. We're only going to talk about one of them today, but the first disruption that tends to be really problematic in a lot of classrooms nationwide is dun, 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 the call out. Actually, maybe I should have said dun, 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 the call out, because it's bad, right? I don't know who loves Calvin and Hobbes as much as I do, but I love this comic strip. Calvin is just sitting at his desk and he's bored out of his mind. And all of a sudden he yells out, "Boring!" And as he gets sent to the principal's office, he says, yeah, kill the messenger. So we're going to talk about the call out. A call out is when a student says something, when a student says anything without teacher permission. And I want to note first that sometimes the call outs might be relevant. So a student says, "My pencil broke." It's probably important that your kids have writing tools. "I don't know how to do it." Probably you need to know if your students don't understand content. "No, her name is Maya, not Mia." Is it important to know how to pronounce students' names? Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes call-outs can be relevant. Sometimes call-outs, however, are irrelevant. So a kiddo saying something like, "When is lunch?" during a math lesson, or "I think my mom is picking me up" during a writing lesson, or a kiddo coming to the rug for calendar and saying, "Let's have a party." No, let's not. Let's start calendar. The point I want to make is it doesn't matter if it's relevant or irrelevant. If the comment or a question has been made or asked without teacher permission, it's considered a call out. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this. Do you remember I told you I had this dull roar in my classroom all day long, and it's because of a mistake that I was making? Let me tell you what that mistake was. My biggest mistake was sometimes validating call-outs. And unfortunately, I've learned that this is a really common mistake that a lot of teachers make. I probably could have written our biggest mistake is sometimes validating call-outs. And by validation, what I mean is when a teacher acknowledges the content of what a student says. Acknowledging the content of that call-out is considered a validation. So if you don't mind, just look at the words on this page for a second and see if you can identify what's the most dangerous word on this page. What would it be? And wouldn't it be the word sometimes? Because sometimes implies that we're being inconsistent as a teacher, right? So let me tell you why I have this disgusting picture of a rat on the screen. It's because if this rat pushes a lever and a pellet of food dispenses every single time, so lever, pellet, lever, pellet, lever, pellet, we would say that the rat is on a fixed schedule of reinforcement, meaning every single lever push is going to result in reinforcement. However, if the rat pushes the lever and a pellet dispenses only sometimes, so lever, pellet, lever, nothing, lever, pellet, lever, nothing, we would say that the rat is on a variable schedule of reinforcement. And guess what happens to lever pushing behavior if you put the rat on a variable schedule of reinforcement? Unfortunately, the behavior spikes. We see an increase in severity and intensity of lever pushing behavior in the face of inconsistency because the rat doesn't know which lever push is going to result in the reinforcement. And unfortunately, the same thing is true with our kiddos, that if we sometimes validate their call-outs, but not always, sometimes maybe we correct them, we're going to see an increase in call-out behavior. So let me talk about 4 really common types of validations. And would you just be thinking, have I ever done any of these? Am I guilty of any of these? One type of validation is teachers acknowledging the right answer. So teacher says, "We're going to learn the word glimmer." Student says, "I know that word. It means to glow." Yep, you're right. It does. That's acknowledging a right answer. Another type of validation would be answering a question. So teacher says, "Okay, today everyone, you'll get to give your opinion." Wait, what's an opinion? It means what you think. So we've answered the student's question. Another type of validation is negotiating ideas. So teacher says, "We're going to read about apples today, everyone." But I hate apples." You don't have to like them, but we're still going to read about them. So I maybe get into a battle of wills with the student as we negotiate ideas. And then the last type of validation I'll note is allowing correction. So teacher says, "Today is August 22nd, everyone." "No, it's August 23rd. "Oh, you're right. It is August 23rd. And before you get upset and say, "Well, Sarah, sometimes I am wrong and I want students to know that it's okay to make mistakes and I want them to know that they can correct me." I agree. I don't disagree with that at all. But the problem is the method the student is using to solicit for attention or to make that comment. So we'll talk about how to fix that instead in a minute, but all of these are types of validations. So can we do just a quick practice? And would you think about which type of validation would this be? Teacher says, okay, it's time for PE. No, today is art. We don't have art until tomorrow. Of course, that would be negotiating an idea, right? Okay, next one. Teacher says, let's go to the rug. For calendar? Yep, for calendar. That would be answering the student's question. Okay, next one. Teacher says, I think Thomas is our pledge helper today. No, he went yesterday. Oh, you're right. Today it's Maddie's turn. That would be allowing correction. And then last one, teacher says, thanks to kids who turned in their homework. I turned in mine. I know you did. Thank you. Thank you very much. That would be acknowledging a right answer, right? Or acknowledging something the student told you they did well. Here's what I want you to remember though, is that it's not so important what types of validations you might be using. It doesn't, I'm not so concerned that you would memorize, okay, there's acknowledging a right answer and there's allowing students to correct me and negotiating. It doesn't really matter the types of validations. What matters is that the validations exist. And what I think would be helpful is just to recognize that they exist in various forms and to think about, am I using validations in any of these forms? Because if you are, it doesn't really matter which type of validation it is. It's the equivalent of a pellet being dispensed for the call-out behavior, and we'll see an increase in call-outs. I want to just know why we as teachers sometimes validate call-outs, because I hear a lot of teachers who give really thought out reasons for why they validate call-outs. Sometimes teachers say, well, I want to convey value of my students. I want them to know that I recognize them and see them as human beings. Sometimes teachers say, well, because I want to promote participation. At least if they're calling out, I know that they're with me during the lesson and they're engaged in the content. And sometimes teachers say because students' call-outs add relevance or meaning during instruction. So, if they call something out or ask a question, then I realize maybe other kids have that same question or that same idea. And at the heart of all of these, I think, is teachers who would prefer to be like the beloved Miss Honey from Matilda more than Professor Umbridge from Harry Potter, right? I'm going to allow call-outs because I want to convey value. I want to promote participation. I want students to add relevance during instruction. I want to be Miss Honey, not Professor Umbridge, who eventually gets run out of the school. So let's talk about, if you fall into that category, if any of those reasons resonate with you, what are the risks of call-outs specifically? We've talked about what are the risks of disruptions, but now looking specifically at a call-out, which is students saying something without permission, what are the risks of that happening? One risk is that they interrupt instruction, which I'll show you a video example of in just a minute. Another risk is because of the interrupted instruction, you see a lot of impeded learning and achievement. This would also be tied to the fact that it reduces think time if kids are always just calling out when they arrive at an answer. You'll see increased teacher reprimands in the face of call-outs and increased student stress. And unfortunately, when you see increased student stress, you often see escalation, right? We're going to see escalation into other disruptions if we allow call-outs. So here's the video I told you about. This was actually a video that was so fun for me to do. Because what I did is I took a class of first graders that was very well managed, that was very on task and quiet. And I said to their teacher, hey, can I come in and try something with your class? What I want to do is teach a vocabulary lesson, but what I am going to do is act the way I see a lot of teachers act, by being inconsistent in the way I respond to call-outs. So sometimes I corrected the call-outs, sometimes I didn't, but I tried to just respond the way I see a lot of teachers respond to call-outs. And all I'm hoping you can do is count how many times I'm interrupted as I acknowledge call-outs. How many call-outs can you count? And sometimes it's difficult because there's so many at once. It's tricky to tally, but try your best and just count for me, if you don't mind, how many times am I interrupted as I teach this lesson. Thanks so much. Ooh, and listen how quietly you're sitting. Good job. Okay, here's the first one. The first thing I'm going to pull out is a picture of my daughter.
I knew it.
This is my daughter, Isabel. Can you say Isabel?
Isabel. I've seen her before.
Have you seen Isabel?
Guess what?
What?
My cousin name is Isabel.
Oh, you have a cousin named Isabel. Great. Logan
My
raised his
sister
hand.
has the same shirt as Isabel.
She has the same shirt as Isabel? Fun. Well, Isabel is in
I have a friend named Isabel.
It's my turn. It's my turn right now, okay? Isabel is in 6th grade. She's 11 years old, and she thinks that she's really cool. If you say to her, "Hi, Isabel," a lot of times she doesn't just say hi, she says, "What's up?" Can you do it like she does? Ready? What's up? This is Isabel. So that's the first thing I want to show you, is that I have a daughter named Isabel. The next thing I want to show you from my sack
is $100,000.
No, it's not $100,000. It's actually, I'll show you as soon as you're sitting quietly, just like that, Dominic. The other thing I wanted to show you with it, the other reason I brought it, is because I love Christmas. My favorite, Reese, it's my turn. My favorite holiday in the whole world is Christmas. So I brought it to show I love gold, I love Christmas. Noelle?
My favorite color is gold, and I love Christmas too.
Same as me. Wow.
The first thing I love Christmas because it gives you a lot of presents.
Because you get a lot of presents at Christmas, that's why you like it?
And you get your favorite Santa gives you whatever you wanted.
Sometimes Santa does give you whatever you want, if you're good, huh? Then he gives you that.
I had an iPad for Christmas, but he didn't give me it.
Aww.
And she gave my sister an iPad.
Bummer. Okay. I'll call on Cody because she raised her hand. Good job raising your hand, Cody. Vocabulary means when we study new words and we learn new words. So I have some new words I want to show you today. Ooh, and look how quietly you're sitting. Good job. The first word that I want to show you is the word suspend. Will you say the word suspend with me? Suspend. Good. This time will you get your...
That means you're like bigger than like a lot of things.
Means you're bigger than a lot of things? Ooh, not quite.
Higher.
Not quite. We'll talk about it though, okay? We'll talk about it. If you suspend, it means that you hang from something and your feet are not touching the ground. The next word I want to do with you is the word perform. Will you say perform 3 times? Perform, perform, perform. Do you already know what it means?
Yes. It means that you like put on a play in front of an audience.
Put on a play in front of an audience. You got it.
It looks like they're joking.
It kind of does look like they're joking, but let me tell you what's happening.
I can't see.
You can't see?
That's what I could guess.
If you perform, it means you put on a show in front of somebody. Maybe you sing, maybe you dance, maybe you act like in a play.
What act are they doing?
The act they're doing, I'm not really sure. It just says these children are performing in a school play.
In my class, they had words of what they're doing.
Oh, yeah, this one does, it just tells the word perform, but it doesn't say what the play is. Let's see, what was I going to tell you? Oh, you can sing, you can dance, you can act, but if you do it in front of other people, that's called performing. Reese, turn all the way around. Thank you. Okay, so depending on how you counted, you probably got something around 22 interruptions in just 4 minutes, which is how many per minute? Did you do the math yet? It's about 5 per minute, right? I've been interrupted about 5 times per minute as I try to give this instruction. So I went then for 12 minutes. This vocabulary lesson took 12 minutes. And by the end of 12 minutes, guess what? I had gone from 22 call-outs to 97 call-outs in 12 minutes. Can you even? It was so frustrating. So if you've done the math, how many is that per minute? About 8 call-outs per minute, right? I mean, this was a hard lesson. Even though I was doing it on purpose, that was really difficult to have instruction that was that disjointed. So my question then is, which risk seems the most harmful to you? Would it be that callouts interrupt instruction, that they impede our students' learning and achievement, that they increase teacher reprimands, that they increase our student stress, or that they eventually escalate into other disruptions? Which risk seems the most harmful to you? And again, it's one of those trick questions because all of them are awful. None of them are acceptable or okay. So let's talk then about how. How do you manage callouts? How do you get kids not to do that? You're not going to be surprised to hear there's two parts to this: expectations and feedback. So I hope you remember our expectations model. We said that anytime you want kids to meet an expectation, you better be sure that you're telling them how the behavior looks with their bodies and how it sounds with their mouths. And of course, in this case, a time frame isn't going to be relevant. So I want to show you this video. It's back to that same group of first graders. And all I want you to notice is that I tell the kids what to do with their mouths and what to do with their bodies when they want to speak. Will you see if you can identify that? You know what, first graders? I want your eyeballs on me because I think we need to have a talk about something. Go ahead and sit flat on your bottom. Reese, fold your legs just like Allie and put your hands in your lap. Okay, look at my eyeballs just like Mark so I know you're listening. Susan, just like that. I've noticed a problem that's happening. And I think it's my fault because I haven't been very clear about what I wanted you to do. So let me tell you what I want you to do while I'm here. Ready? When I'm here with you and I'm teaching, if you have something to say, I want you to raise your hand. And the reason I'm going to ask you to do that is because I have too many kids who are just calling things out, and then it's hard for me to tell you what we're supposed to learn, and not everybody's getting a turn to talk. Seth, I don't think you've said anything, have you? You've just been sitting politely, but lots of kids keep talking the whole time. So I'm going to make a rule that goes with my classroom rules poster right here, and it says, raise your hand to speak. Will you read it with me?
Raise your hand to speak. What's on number one?
Oh, I didn't call on you, Jax. From now on, I will only call on you. I will only listen to what you have to say if your hand is raised and if I call on you. Okay, so did you see how the expectation was stated? It was, I will only call on you if your mouth is closed and your hand is raised. So what are they supposed to do with their bodies? Raise their hand if they have something to say. What are they supposed to do with their mouths? Keep their mouths closed. That was the expectation. But then, of course, the question is, okay, well, what if kids don't raise their hands? Then what? Because I might be super clear about that expectation, but they may not meet it. Well, it has to do with your feedback. And what we want to do is remove validation. So just as a quick example, the teacher says something like, okay, everyone, today we're going to learn about opinions. Wait, what's an opinion? Uh-oh, mouths are closed. And what I've just done there, coming to our feedback portion of our graphic, is I've just removed attention. Remember, correction can include removal. What I've done is I've removed, not necessarily attention, because I still responded by saying, uh-oh, mouths are closed, but I've removed acknowledgement that I understood what the comment was or what the question was. So remember that feedback are the legs on which the body of expectation stands. Expectations will not maintain without effective feedback to support them. And of course, praise is part of that, right? It's going to be very, very, very important that I praise the behavior when kids are doing it well. But if I validate, if I don't remove that acknowledgement of callouts, I will never, ever extinguish the behavior. So I'm going to go back to the same video now. And what I'm hoping you can notice is that during the practice, students are praised and corrected. In other words, I remove the validation for the call-out behavior. Will you just notice what the feedback portion of this looks like? Let's do a quick practice. This is called Who Knows How to Raise Their Hand to Speak. Raise your hand if you can tell me your favorite color. You can only choose one, and I'm only calling on kids who raise their hand quietly. Hadley?
I like every single color.
Every color. Isla?
I like pink.
Pink. She raised her hand. She likes pink. Thank you. Noelle?
I like every single color except orange.
Okay, you can only tell me one color. Every color except orange, just tell me one color. Dominic?
I like red.
Red, perfect.
I like purple.
Oh, I didn't call on you, Piper, so your mouth is closed. I'm only calling on quiet kids. Gavin?
Golden.
Gold, just like me. AJ?
Red.
Red. Bryn?
Pink.
Pink, perfect. Put your hands down. Good. Let me show you what else I'm going to do. As I see that you're following this rule to raise your hand to speak, you're not just calling things out, but you're waiting your turn. I have these little magnets that I'm going to put here. Reese, turn all the way around. Yeah, and I'll take that. Thanks. I have these little magnets here, and you notice I have some little dashes. Will you count those with me, starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Counting. What I'm going to do, when I see you following the rules and raising your hand to speak, I will add a little magnet. Okay, so we will talk more about reward systems in a later session because I wouldn't actually recommend what I did as a reward system for all day, every day, but I just did it in that video for sake of training the behavior. But I'm going to come back to this now because I hope what you saw is that as I non-validated the callouts, there was a reduction in the callouts, right? So I'm coming back to our numbers from before. 22 callouts in the first 4 minutes, 97 callouts in 12 minutes. What happened then after we finished our vocabulary lesson and we went back to seats for our math lesson? Well, as I continued not to validate callouts, I only had 4 callouts in a 60-minute period. During the next 60 minutes after stating this expectation, that we need to raise our hands if we have something to say, and supporting it with feedback, praise of kids who are doing it well, and correction or removal of validation for kids who continue to do it. 4 call-outs in 60 minutes, which is an average of 1 call-out every 15 minutes. That to me feels manageable. And I know from experience that were I to continue doing this, to continue having that expectation and not validating call-outs, it would reduce to 0 in the next day or 2. So let me tell you 3 of my favorite, what I'm going to call must-have responses if you want to eliminate call-outs in your classroom. One might just be, oh, your mouth is closed. Another one I got from a teacher with whom my student taught, who still to this day is one of the most effective teachers I've ever had the privilege of working with. What she would do is if a student made a comment without raising a hand, she would cue them to raise their hand and shake her head. And she would even remove eye contact as a way of removing teacher attention for the call out. So student calls out and she would go like this, oh. And it was brilliant because guess what the student did then? Raised their hand quietly. And then she would call on them because they had solicited appropriately for attention. One more response I'll give you is to say, oh, I'll take a quiet hand. So if it's a question you want to answer, a comment you want to address, it's okay to have students say that as long as they raise their hand in order to ask that question or make that comment. So I like this picture of the stoplight here because I think sometimes we look at responses like this and we think they're punitive. We think, well, I don't want to be that kind of teacher. But can you imagine what would happen in intersections if we didn't have red lights? If people were allowed to just drive through intersections at will, we would have so many accidents, so many car wrecks, so many tragedies. And the same thing, unfortunately, happens in our classroom if we don't control the conversation. By the way, in case you're feeling nervous about this, we will talk in a later session about how to get kids talking in the classroom a lot, how to use engagement to get a lot of academic language happening in your classroom. But academic language is different than conversational chatter. So in case you're fretting about that, don't fret. We will talk about how to get kids talking in a different session. But this session, we're talking about how do you eliminate noise on their terms. Okay, let me also say that these must-have responses would need to be done in a no-nonsense and non-emotional manner. Okay, we're going to channel Professor McGonagall here. So let me give you an example. We would say something like, uh-oh, your mouth is closed. Instead of angrily, your mouth is closed right now. Ooh, can you hear the heat and the emotion, the charge in my voice when I do it angrily? Or something that's passive or negotiable, like, uh-oh, your mouth is closed. I don't want to be on either end of that spectrum, harsh or passive. I want to be right there in the middle, non-emotional, direct, non-confrontational, matter of fact. Uh-oh, your mouth is closed. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 scenarios, and I just want you to see if you can identify the mistake that the teacher makes in each of these scenarios. I'm always going to look first at teacher behavior before I consider student behavior. So first interaction, teacher says, okay, let's get lined up for lunch. Wait, is my mom coming to get me? I don't know, we'll just have to wait and see. What mistake did the teacher make? Of course, she validated that question by acknowledging the content of what the student said, right? Okay, next one. Okay, everyone, tomorrow is something called a fire drill. But I'm scared of fire drills. There's nothing to be scared of. That's why we're going to talk about it. Did you notice? Teacher validated that comment again. Number next. Okay, let's get our math books out, everyone. Wait, but you said we could have recess first. You're right, I did, but next time raise your hand to say that. If you answer the question or acknowledge the comment and then tell them to raise their hand, that's the equivalent of dispensing the pellet and saying, but next time don't push the lever. It's not going to fix the problem. Teacher still validated the comment. Here's what might have been more effective. Teacher says, okay, everyone, let's get lined up for lunch. Wait, is my mom coming to get me? Oh, you're welcome to raise your hand to ask that. Okay, teacher says, guess what, everyone? Tomorrow is something called a fire drill. Oh, but I'm scared of fire drills. Oh. And I'm just going to put my finger to my lips and shake my head because I'm not taking hands at that point. I know that I'm going to explain how a fire drill works and how we don't need to be nervous. So I'm not going to say, you're welcome to raise your hand to say that because I'm not willing to take a hand at that point. So I'm just going to ask for quiet. Teacher says, okay, let's get our math books out, everyone. But you said we could have recess. Uh-oh, our mouths are closed. And in every single case, what you're doing is not acknowledging that you heard the content of what the student said. I'm still shutting the comment down, but I'm not going to further the conversation by my response. So in summary, in the face of callouts, we're either saying mouth closed or hand raised. But I would say be careful about telling them they can raise their hand if they want to say that, because you only want to encourage hand raising, or say, you can raise your hand if you want to say that, if you're really actually going to take a hand. I hear a lot of teachers who will say to students, oh, you can raise your hand to say that, and the students will do that, and then they just keep going with instruction. So don't say that unless you really are going to entertain hand raising at that point. Mouth closed, hand raised. Also a quick tip to beware of open-ended questions. You wouldn't want to say something like, does anyone know what glimmer means? Because you're going to invite a slew of responses and reactions, and that's on you, not them. Because you've just asked a conversational open-ended question of a room of 20, 25, 30 students. I compare that to if we as adults see a stop sign that's down. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but for me, it's always kind of confusing. I'm like, so am I supposed to stop? I think I am. I think I'm supposed to stop here, but the stop sign is down. So what happens? And it creates confusion. We want to avoid doing that to our students. Okay, the very last piece I'm going to address is teachers who make this comment, because a lot of teachers say, okay, Sarah, I get it. Disruptions are harmful to kids. Call-outs specifically as a disruption are harmful to kids, but I'm okay with a little noise. Like, I don't want to be super militant. Given the choice between Miss Honey and Professor Umbridge, I'm still picking Miss Honey. Let me tell you what that's like for me. When my daughter was in 3rd grade, she had this lovely eraser collection that she kept on her closet shelf, and the erasers were perfectly lined up and they were assorted according to her favorite ones, and she took such good care of them. And one day her little 8-month-old cousin came to visit, and I saw him crawling toward her eraser collection on the bottom shelf. And I said, uh-oh, Bella, you better grab Dawson. He's about to grab your erasers. And she said, oh, it's okay. I don't mind if he just touches one. And as adults, we can chuckle at that because we know how unrealistic and unreasonable that is. To think that a baby can handle touching just one eraser, that he can self-regulate like that. Nope, he can't. And in this picture, you can see what happened is he went over and just full swipe messed up those erasers, even though she was hoping he would only touch one. So what's the lesson here? It's that it's completely unrealistic to expect all students to accurately discern when a call out is appropriate and what to say. And I would say it's not just unrealistic, I would say it's also unreasonable, and it's even unfair to put the burden of discernment on our students for them to determine, is this an appropriate call out? Is this an appropriate time? Is this truly relevant? Our responsibility as teachers, if we really do want to manage this behavior, is to be consistent. Okay, last question then. What is something you liked or learned about preventing disruptions? For me, it comes back to this idea that if my students are disruptive, the very first thing I'm going to consider is whether I'm validating callouts. Because if I'm validating callouts, even 1 out of every 25 or 50, I will continue to see callouts, and I will continue to give the students control of the conversation in the classroom. As soon as I don't validate, as soon as I manage my behavior, I begin to see students who are much more successful and calm, and I prevent that most pervasive of disruptions. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time.